Hello, welcome to Starlight Talks. Alex was supposed to be here this week to talk about ADD, but she's not feeling well, so I'm here with Lillian to talk about cell processing. So I'm going to wait for some people to join. In the meantime, check out our website, autism.com, our Facebook page, Autism. And if you're watching this as a rerun, then just skip forward a few minutes. Yep. So we're going to talk about cell processing this week, which is common to people with autism. We tend to have a delayed reaction, whether that's answering a question, reacting to a sudden noise, a sudden action, and we also do what's called zoning out, where it seems like we're not paying attention. And we're going to talk about both of those things and how me and my sister Lillian, how we both have that and how we react differently to the same thing. How it's very individualized. And if you have any questions, feel free to start asking them and we'll get to them all eventually. We do this live broadcast every week, at Wednesdays at 7, and next week we will be talking about family vacations. So feel free to join us next week for that. I also have a blog on OurTism.com where I write articles about living with autism, and we offer life map coaching for those on the spectrum and those with similar profiles. That's all available on OurTism.com. So let's get started. So slow processing is when we get information, it takes a while for us to absorb that information and translate that to something we understand, and then translate that again into a response. So that's why often we get extra time on a test and why that's helpful. Why sometimes you'll ask a question, we'll ask you to repeat it maybe in a different way, and maybe it's just like to add that extra time so we have time to respond to it. Other people need to just be silent so they can't go, oh, I'm thinking about it. They have to spend that energy processing it. And everyone has a different amount of time they need to process things. And if you keep throwing information at someone who is still processing, they will then have to keep processing all that new information and have a harder time responding. So that can also send someone into an overwhelming sensation, such as a sensory overwhelm or a zoning out moment.
This would make group conversations very difficult because it's always bouncing back and forth. You register who's speaking, when they're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Group conversations tend to have sometimes multiple things happening at the same time, which then makes it harder to keep up with your processing. You tend to get overwhelmed and just check out a little bit, trying to process everything. Parties with things going on in the background can be hard. When you have, it tends to help sometimes if you have a visual stimulus or a physical stimulus that can keep you grounded to help you process things. If you have more than one option of processing through different senses, sometimes it can be easier to take in what you're processing.
Hi, Wendy. Hi, Grammy. Thank you guys for joining us. So we're talking about slow processing with Lillian and Papa. So with slow processing, one thing that can be difficult is if you're in a classroom setting and the teacher all of a sudden calls on you without. Sometimes teachers will just call on students without having their hand raised. Sometimes it looks like the student's not paying attention. They'll go, "Hey, you, answer this question," and I'm testing to see if you're paying attention. And even if you were paying attention, that startle of that question and being called out can send someone into a zone out or a overload and overwhelm, and they won't be able to answer. They might become selectively mute. They might there might be a lot going on where they will not be able to answer, and that can help happen in the home environment, just like something startled that they didn't expect. That can be overwhelming.
Like quick-paced improv type games can be very difficult. I also think they're very useful in helping us to improve our processing and how to deal with it in a calm and easy way rather than just reacting out of fear. I did a lot of improv. I don't know if I was necessarily quick, but I think I'm very good at staying calm and finding some sort of way to move forward in it. Now that when I first started, I would just freeze and do nothing and leave my partner hanging. But I think those games are very useful. We would like popcorn reading, popcorn storytelling, those sort of things were very.
And you'll see different responses of someone going really quiet or someone just blurting out a random statement that doesn't make any sense. You'll see like all different kinds of reactions to that situation. Yeah, the popcorn can be hard for a lot of different reasons as well.
Yes, it's a very scary thing for a student, especially if you're not good at reading, or just reading out loud, because some people are really good at reading but can't read out loud easily. Stage fright, all that other stuff comes with that. But slow processing is very difficult for popcorn reading.
Did you explain what popcorn reading was?
No. So if you don't know what popcorn reading is, popcorn storytelling, whatever, it's basically jumping from one person to another, and it can be at any moment.
Well, there's two ways of doing it.
Yeah.
There's one where the teacher will call on a student randomly, and it's when we're reading normally, and they'll be, okay, you're done reading, next person reads, to make sure everyone's following along and reading together, so no one's just sitting there not paying attention, because at any moment you can be called out. And other times the students themselves have to call on someone, and so you're not raising your hand, it's not in a circle, you could randomly be called on any time, and this can cause a lot of anxiety, and it can cause this slow processing or zoning out where like you're looking at the page and can't read it and you can't respond. Some teachers do it in a question and answer scenario where they'll play a game like for a test where they're like just asking questions that might be on the test, and they'll do a popcorn version of that. And it can be a very uncomfortable situation. if you have these issues. And even if you don't have these issues, it can be really embarrassing if you don't know the answer. But even like someone who does have the answer, that can disappear. And all functioning can disappear, and with how to respond to that. And in the home environment, it might happen when you're yelled at or you're focusing on something and then you're pulled out of it. If you're in the middle of talking about something and that train of thought gets interrupted, that slow processing or zoning out can hit because you get overwhelmed and go, I have no idea what I was going to say next. But it was important. And I think it happens more when you're in a state of mind where you're tired or overwhelmed or sick, where that becomes exaggerated in those situations. And then to cover zoning out is a little bit different than slow processing. Zoning out is not daydreaming. That's a completely different thing. Zoning out is when it can happen in a conversation when you're about to say something and you forgot what you're going to say. Your mind just goes completely blank. It can happen when you're trying to listen to someone and all of a sudden you're staring at them trying to listen, but the words are not being comprehended. You see the words coming out of their mouth, but they have no meaning. This is called zoning out, when it can seem like the person is not paying attention when they are, and they'll ask you to repeat yourself maybe multiple times, or maybe they won't be able to communicate. And it's sort of your mind's way of protecting itself. It's become overwhelmed with too much information, thinking too fast, it's getting anxious, and it shuts itself down and it has to restart. So zoning out can happen while you're watching TV, or while you're talking to someone, or in a situation where you're startled. Your body is overwhelmed, and so it zones out, and you can't function the way you were able to moments before. And this can last a couple seconds, it can last a couple hours, depending on the situation and what you're going through, how overwhelmed you are, your state of mind, all of that. And there's really nothing you can do except wait it out. Wait till you're able to function again and process.
So as a parent, if we see our child zoning out, is there anything we can do to help? Or things we absolutely shouldn't do?
With zoning out, you shouldn't wave your hand in front of their face, or clap, or speak louder, or be like, why aren't you paying attention? Those kinds of things. Not that it will hurt the zoning out, it just hurts the kids' feelings who are maybe trying to pay attention and can't, or are unaware that you're speaking, because they might not even be able to hear you in a zone out, depending on how extreme it is. And because your senses can shut down too in a zone out.
I'm not sure how much outward support can help, because it's your brain shut down. So it's usually the person experiencing it has to pull themselves out somehow. Everyone, I think, has a different way of doing it, and sometimes it's just time. You just need to wait for your processing to come back and speed up again, or whatever is happening inside your brain. Some people just need to stop everything I think it's the individual, and whatever they need, they figure it out as they get older. I don't know if there's anything that someone else can really do besides just being there to support them and going, you're not getting this, let's just slow down and wait for it to work again.
Mm-hmm.
What about with the slow processing?
So with the slow processing, I guess it depends on the individual, because I guess some people have faster processing in different senses, different areas. For me personally, my language processing is really slow. So that's hard. I know I do a lot more miscommunicating and misunderstanding, slower processing through text. If you give me a visual of some kind that's like a picture or something, I'll process it a lot faster. I did ASL in high school, and that was like so fast for me. I could process that really, really easily. But my language is really slow. So for me, it would be talking slowly, rephrasing things. Sometimes I can't process certain phrases.
I know for me, my stutter will get worse when I'm slow processing, and I'll be trying to say a word or trying to come up with a word, and a lot of times people will guess what that word is, and a lot of times it's really obvious, and I don't get upset by that, but people do get upset when you finish someone else's sentence. So I'd be aware and just have that discussion with whoever's having that slow processing issue, if they're okay with you doing that or not. If don't get upset when someone asks you to repeat something. I know I've talked about, like, my little sister will tell a story, and I'll really be invested in that story and want to hear the ending, and I've zoned out, and I'm like, oh, I didn't quite hear everything, can you repeat it? And she'll get upset, like, well, you didn't really care if you didn't hear it when I told it. That's not true. I might be trying really hard to listen, but I've zoned out.
Yeah, just waiting patiently for them to respond in their own time. And I would say
you might not even be aware of the zone out either. Mm-hmm. So especially at a younger age, if you're not fully in your body, you might not be aware that you have zoned out and missed information at a given time. But so that might be why, oh, I've told you that. No, you didn't. I never heard that. It probably is because the kid was zoned out when you said it. Or the adult.
Yeah, zoning out and slow processing isn't stuck to just autistic people.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if you experience this, it could be something.
There's that common thing people say, they're like taking a test, and like right before the test they knew all the information, they filled out the study guide, they would like know where on the study guide that information is, but they're looking at the questions, they have no idea what the answer is on the test. And that's an anxiety causing zone out. That happens very common. So that's a situation where you could have zoned out. It's similar to that sensation, but it can be more extreme where like all functioning could stop, where like you can't communicate in any shape or form sometimes in that situation. Or it could just be, I don't know what that word is. You were talking about stimulation. Do you want to go more into that, how that helps with slow processing and with just processing in general?
Well, I was just talking about how different senses can process different speeds, was what I was saying. I guess, yes, stimulation itself can help improve your processing depending on what you need. If a certain sense keeps you in a state where you're where it's easier to process things, you'll learn that, and you just use that stimulation to help you process. Could be holding something, could be just movement of your body, looking at a certain color. It's sometimes cutting off visual stimulation can help audio stimulation.
Adding stimulation, so like doing something or stopping and avoiding stimulation could also help.
So a common thing is to cut off the visual input to process the audio input faster. That's why many autistic people will look away from someone when they're listening. And it's that to help that processing. Because when they're looking, they're visually processing and not audio processing. So they won't hear what you're saying. They'll only see what your emotions and all that.
Yeah, looking someone in the eye can easily send someone into auditory zone out, where they're only seeing the visuals because there's so much information on the face. That's why a lot of people cannot concentrate while they're looking you in the eye, because they're like, okay, I'm seeing you blink, I'm seeing your face move, I'm seeing all this emotion, and I don't know how to process all that information, as well as listen to the sound coming out and what that means. Which is why a lot of those on the spectrum will avoid eye contact, because there's way too much information happening there.
Yeah.
So drawing, stimming, those kind of things can help with processing.
Yeah, sometimes doodling will help switch you to your right brain rather than your left brain, which will sometimes speed up your processing and help you understand different concepts, while also the other way, if you're writing out words and stuff, will help you understand the other side of your brain, and it moves your brain to process at different speeds.
Echolalia and that kind of
Echolalia is a good is how I process a lot of things.
Echolalia is repeating what you hear, whether that's silently or out loud. You'll see someone mimic what's being said to them, and a lot of times that will help process that information. It could just be certain phrases, it could be the entire thing, it could be certain words repeated, that can help with that processing. Accents. Echolalia. Copying accents. Lisps. Just like the pattern that someone is speaking in. And then there's just like the different ways that different people think can cause that slow processing, where, for example, I think in pictures. So when I'm thinking about what you've said to me, that's in words, and I have to translate that into pictures in my mind, and then translate the pictures I have in response to that, and then translate those pictures back into words so I can reply to you. And that takes a lot of time for me to process that. And a lot of times, because I use pictures, those don't necessarily come up with words that work perfectly. And so I struggle finding a word that will match what I'm looking at in my head. And so that'll take me longer to find a phrase or a sentence or a word that matches what I'm looking at. And then with Lillian, it's even takes longer because she thinks in the five senses.
Yeah.
So sound, taste, touch. So she'll have noise. So there'll be like a little ding for something she's thinking about, or the smell of flowers, or something like that will come up, and she has to translate that into words. And you can see how that can be even more frustrating and take longer to express herself. So everyone has a different way of thinking. And a lot of times with autism, it's not an organized brain either. It's a lot of chaos in there, where one thought is connected to a lot of other things that are very similar. So you can't just extract that one thing. Where like with ADD, what I understand about that is they have these like really great compartments or bins of organized thoughts that are just running around everywhere. And so it's hard to grab that right thought, but once they have it, they have all of this information. But with autism, it's like everything's just mushed together. And so when you grab what you think you want, you've also grabbed a lot of other things too. I have a question. Do you experience difficulty writing your thoughts down on paper? This is really tough for my 19 SP son.
So I would say we have very different experiences with writing. For me, I can write certain things, but it's very hard for me to portray emotion in my writing. I tend to say things very bluntly, both in language and writing, so it's very difficult for me to write, I would say. I tend to come across very harsh, hurt people's feelings, miscommunicate a lot through writing, so I tend to just stay away from that. Texting, emailing, I want a verbal communication of some sort, FaceTiming, face-to-face. It's just so much easier for me. Writing is an extremely difficult medium for me to both process what someone else is saying and to write down my own thoughts.
That was said really well.
Thank you.
I like typing more so than handwriting.
And I like handwriting for me.
Yeah, I like the way that flows my thoughts out. I found I'm not. I don't speak as well auditory, and I don't know if that's because of my stutter or that I think in pictures or what is. But I found with writing, I am able to develop my thoughts much easier when I write it out, and especially understanding myself and my opinions. I like to write those down to figure out what I'm feeling and going through more so than speaking it out loud. But then I'll like go and speak it after I write it because I then understand it. But there's some things that like I'll have a hard time saying. Like when I was little, I had a hard time saying out loud that I was sorry, but I would write this huge long letter about how sorry I was, and I would leave it in my sister's bedroom or my parents' bedroom for them to find. I couldn't even hand it to them. So I did that a lot when I was little. So I just like whatever way you can communicate, I would utilize that. If it's not writing, then there's probably another way. If it's not typing, writing, there's a lot of other ways. There's drawing, there's taking photos, there's facial expression, there's all different ways that you can communicate. We would make up our own language. And, we've made up like our own phrases and words to express ourselves to each other, and understanding when I say this word, this is what I mean, is really important. Because we used to think we were speaking the same language, and when I was little, I would use words that I thought I knew what they meant, but I didn't. Instead of saying I was hungry, I would say my stomach hurt and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of miscommunication in the family when we thought we were being really clear. So making sure you get together and talk about, when I say this, this is what I mean. If you continually hear someone say something and there's frustration there, it's probably because you're both thinking it means something different. And so sitting down and going, this is what these rules mean specifically. This is what respect means. This is what friendship means. This is what love means. And it could be different to each of you, but understanding that is really important in communication and processing. It's like, oh, when my sister says this word, it means something different than when my mom says this word. And we like debating what words mean in our family. It's something we enjoy doing. If anyone has any questions, feel free to continue to ask them. We love answering questions.
questions are very useful.
Do you have any stories about slow processing?
I don't know if I have stories. No, quiet. It's just like most of the time when things get too fast for me, it's just hard for me to stay there. I know there's been a lot of summer camps when I was little where it would get to be too big of a group and I couldn't keep up with the processing, so I just find one or two people who.
I find I'm a lot quieter in a group, where I love one-on-one conversations, and my friends who I've had that figured that out have been able to go, when I have something important to tell you, let's go talk privately one-on-one. So I can really get your full attention because I want to hear what you say, where when it's said in like even in an overwhelming environment such as a restaurant or a party or something like that, even just all of that noise makes it hard to really understand what someone's saying. And I'll often like later on, like a day later or even a week later, go, oh my God, that's what that person meant. Because at that time I wasn't able to process it.
Mm-hmm. I know homework would take me longer, that a science homework would take me twice as long, and then the English assignment would take me 4 times as long.
Yeah.
So I know like teachers would tell me, it's a 20-minute assignment, you can do it. I'm like, no, it's a 4-hour assignment for me. I'm never going to get it done.
Yeah, depending on
Yeah.
the topic, different things you process faster than others, right? Or just like the type of assignment, or if it's just writing down a fact, you can do that so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Where if it's like translate this into your own wording, then it's like that takes you so much longer.
It take me 3 days to do a paragraph. It's difficult.
For me, it's like finding the important information is always really difficult for me. Where it's like, I just want to like write down what I think is interesting, which is not always important. Like, oh, that's interesting, and they're like, yeah, but none of this is like important to the lesson. So like little details will stick out, but like the overall lesson it taught, they're like, why'd you miss that? Why didn't you write any of that down? So and it depends on what the assignment is as well.
Papa has a question.
Of all the autistic challenges that both of you face, what are your greatest challenges?
Wow. Oh, that greatest challenge.
Dealing with people that don't get it.
Yes. Missing out on things that I really would love to be able to do and just can't do, I think is the hardest just for me to deal with. I don't know if that's my biggest challenge overall, but that's how I feel is the biggest.
Yeah.
Is that I would love to go to concerts or big parties, or I know I missed my own grad night in high school because I just couldn't face that, and I think that is the hardest for me to handle, as I want to go, but I know that I just won't have fun there with my slow processing, my overstimulation, all those things. It's just too much for me, and I'll just get sick, and I can't. But I don't know. It's a hard question, but that's how I feel is the biggest challenge.
I would say for me, it's dealing with a world that isn't set up for my success. School in general isn't accommodating for special education, especially with dealing with autism, where it's set up to really be disheartening and tell people on the spectrum that they're not capable, even though they are. And just like little things, if they could be changed or teachers could be supportive, even unintentionally I've had issues with that, where that the sentence "try harder." Oh, I hate that. I'm always giving it 100%, and I'm still told, "Well, if you just try harder," and that is so defeating when I'm putting in so much effort and that's not recognized, and that happens so much. And like, if I could teach one thing about autism, it's like we're always trying our best on the spectrum. Like, it's a really tiring way to live, a really painful way to live, and we're trying so hard, and the world doesn't see it and thinks that so often it feels like the world thinks that I'm not trying, that I'm lazy, that all these other things I'm all these other things, instead of, no, I'm just going through a hard time and things are really difficult the way they're set up. And if just things could change a little bit in the direction of, let's create an environment where someone with autism can learn and function and feel welcomed, then I feel like there would be less of these actual issues of slow processing, zoning out. All those things won't be as big of an issue if the world were to set it up to be successful for someone on the spectrum. So I think that's one of the biggest issues.
And when she says the world, I do believe that parents see it.
Yeah.
We're not putting you in that world. I believe parents see how most parents, but I do believe they see how hard we try.
Yeah, I'm definitely talking about school, like, mostly.
I just want to make sure that
it's just some of the workforce and mostly school.
But I think letting your child know that you see it will boost them a little bit. If you just go, I know you're trying so hard and I'm so proud that you are. I think that is a big boost to make them keep going.
Yeah, that's really important, to be the one voice that says, I believe in you, when, even though they're not like straight out being told, I don't believe in you, from their teachers, their actions and the grades and the way they're treated is telling them that. Whether they know that's what they're being told, it's absorbed and it's mentally draining, and you'll see that drop in confidence, definitely, when you're in a situation where you're being told that. Especially public schools at the moment do very little for those who are autistic, as the curriculum is very uniform and geared toward neurotypical students. Yes, it's very geared toward the typical student. But I think even a curriculum geared toward those with autism is inclusive to those who don't have autism, because I think the way we learn isn't going to be a way that other people can't learn, because how we learn more by hands-on and by projects and by applying the knowledge. Where how much does memorization help you? I know so many people, my peers, who memorized stuff for the test, got a better grade than me, and I barely passed, but I remembered the information because I knew how to apply it and I knew what it meant. And to this day, I still understand that information. And like, my friends are like, oh, how where did you learn that? I was like, in the same classroom we were both in. And you got an A in the class and I got a C. Because the way, I can't just memorize things, I need to really learn it in order to write it down on the test and make my project work. So I think if we all did that process, that it would be beneficial even for others that don't have autism or don't have any form of special education, LD, difference, atypical mind.
You have one more
Okay.
question?
Do you both think the challenges you have identified are uniquely yours, or do you think they're commonplace with your autistic peers? These are all common.
They're
issues.
common. The way we feel about them are unique. I think we all feel differently about the
Mhm.
challenges. Some people hate them. Some people are like, it's fine. It's my life. I think it's just very different the way our responses to them. But I think we all have very similar challenges.
Yeah. I think it's unique that I am not ashamed of my zoning out or my slow processing in any way. That is part of my autism. Not that it's not a challenge, that I don't wish it was easier and all those things, but it is, I'm not ashamed that I go through those things, because with autism I also am able to do all these other things that come with it that are really beneficial. But there's definitely a lot of people on the spectrum that will never explain this, because it's a big emotional journey that they don't want to go through to explain their slow processing. They don't want to live through that.
They don't want to be seen different, right?
Yeah,
they want to just,
and they're very ashamed of that. And so even if you're like, hey, pay attention, they're not going to defend themselves, because they're like, I don't want to call attention to that fact that I have autism and that's why I'm doing this. Or maybe they don't know that's why they're doing it.
I think we want to be helped, but we don't want to be treated as less than.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line for people and when expressing it, because some people will just treat you differently when you say things, and it's difficult. They'll do it both ways. They'll just tell you, just deal with it. And then other people will go out of their way to doing too much and supporting, oh, do you need this? Do you need, like, I'll tell you when I need it. And it's overwhelming both ways.
Mm-hmm. So that's why it's important with your autistic person, with your special person, have that conversation of what are your boundaries, what are you okay with, and it's okay if the answer is I don't know. But I think every person is individual with that. But I would say that these issues we're talking about, slow processing, zoning out, stimming, everyone on the spectrum experiences it. To what extent they experience it could be different. How often they experience could be different. How they feel about it could be different. But it is an issue for all people on the spectrum. It's part of the autism diagnosis. So do we have any more questions?
I don't see any more yet.
I would say repetition is a very comfortable place for us.
Yeah.
Something I have always enjoyed is theater because of the repetition. That you know exactly when something's going to happen, what's going to happen, who's going to say it, how to respond to it. A scripted life seems great. And it's where I've learned how to respond to things, how to process things, because I've already processed it once before through that stage life. So to do it in real life can sometimes make it a little easier.
And there's a lot of different kinds of scripting, where that's going over a conversation before having it, or saving a response from an earlier conversation, using it again. And so that's why you'll see people at first, when they have a certain topic come up that they haven't really covered before, have a lot more slower processing than the next time they had that topic discussed. There'll be a faster response because they've scripted and they've saved answers, and they're able to use that. And the more they familiarize themselves and are able to create a script, if someone asks me this is how I'm going to answer, is essentially what scripting is. And it's a useful tool for a lot of those on the spectrum. Some will even ask someone to role play out a scenario to help them practice. Others type it out. Some will have conversations in their head. And there's different ways people script. They'll even like take quotes from movies, books, other people, and do a form of echolalia with their scripting. So that scripting often helps speed up that processing, or at least make it appear that they've processed faster, because they have a ready response to something that's being asked. Where if it's a question they aren't quite familiar with, haven't scripted, you'll see a much slower response. And I'm not saying that those answers are fake. They're genuine answers to that question, but it's a rehearsed answers. Which can be helpful. It's a useful tool for those on the spectrum.
I would say some of my more understood responses that seem more thought out tend to be more scripted, more rehearsed before, asked before.
Yeah.
When it's new, it tends to be slower, a lot more spaces between words, thoughts, and then sometimes people just don't understand what I'm saying at all. I've gotten that quite a few times.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey, I think we're gonna start wrapping up unless we get any more questions. So thank you for joining us this week. We will be back next week, same time, talking about family vacation, next Wednesday, 7 Pacific Standard Time. Feel free to check out the website, OurTism.com. There's if you check out the blog, that's where I post a lot of my writings about different topics. And check out Life Map. We have coaching for life on there for those on the spectrum or similar profiles. We also have social groups and support groups. Support groups happening tomorrow. Happens every other week. It's a really great group of people we have where we talk about personal things about living on the spectrum. Thank you for joining us. This was Lillian joining me talking about slow processing and zoning out. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Stay colorful.